I just want to do a sound check real quick. Can you guys hear me? Thank you.
Yes, we can, Tammy.
Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hi, Tammy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I will go back to mute.
Tammy?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just checking because I never did *6 before to unmute, so
Oh.
you can mute me back now.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
I'll try.
Stop them immediately, Louisiana. Louisiana. Stop that, Louisiana.
unmute. Tammy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. Who's here? Are the regular commissioners assembled?
I believe so. I have to flip through 4 pages now. Let's see. I see
Janet.
you. I see Dave.
Ray's there.
I saw Ray, Deborah,
Okay. Alternates?
Susan,
Susan's here.
Susan Smith.
Mike? Don't see Mike yet. How about Christina Fernandez O'Toole?
what a first night for her, huh?
Yeah, we have to figure if she's here yet. Yeah.
Well, she might only last one night.
Yeah.
I'd hate to join with an open meeting.
Right. Tammy, I want to get back to you.
Yep.
Shelley's in attendance.
Yes.
And when you say you have 4 pages, how many Zooms per page?
1, 2, 3,
Approximately.
5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 20. So right
Okay,
now
so-
there's 90 in attendance.
90.
Yep.
Okay. I think that as far as being recognized to speak, do the participants in the Zoom have to go into a room, or what do they have to do in order to let you know that they wish to speak?
I believe there is a way that you can raise a hand.
Okay,
But I'm not sure how that works for someone that's phoning in.
that's just phoning in.
Well, it's for the computer. When you enter via computer, you can
Yep.
raise a hand,
Right.
but if you're calling in, you can't necessarily do that. But I'll keep my,
And you don't know, all we can do is hear those who are calling in, but you can't see them, so you don't know how many are calling in, correct?
well, no, they're participants. So
Okay,
it
okay.
would be an overall.
All right. So is the commission ready to go?
Is Janet here?
Janet is here.
Yeah, Janet's here on the phone.
Okay.
Dave, Ray, Deborah, can you hear me?
I'm good to go.
Okay, Ray?
He's saying yes.
He should
Yes,
unmute
he-
himself. Is he muted?
Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
If you could all mute yourselves, I would really appreciate it.
Yep. I will,
Enter your participant ID followed by.
Mr.
Yeah,
Briganti, Mr. Briganti, if you could mute yourself, please.
You are in the meeting now. There are more than 90 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded. You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing *6.
okay.
Tammy, you are the organizer. Everyone. You can mute everyone.
I'm trying, I can't
Oh, okay.
find them
Sorry.
because there's 101 participants. So I'm going through trying to find, bear with me.
In my instructions to the public about the public hearing, I will ask everybody to mute themselves. And I'll also tell the public who I wish to hear from first. Okay? So I would say at 7:36, I'd say we're ready to go. And I want to open this special zoning meeting of the Zoning Commission, January 12th, 2021, for the sole purpose of 12.8, a regulation request for change. And the 5 regular members are seated. And I also want to announce that Mike Ziska, Zoning's legal counsel, is taking part in this Zoom. And Mike, you can unmute yourself just simply to, in fact, Mike, I just assume that you keep yourself unmuted.
Okay,
Okay, there you are.
okay, will do.
Um,
Tammy, I just want to make sure you're recording.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Shelley, I would like you to read the legal notice.
Okay. Oh, where did I put them? Hold on.
Hi.
Hold on. I'll get it. I have all this paperwork right here.
Shelley, I can do it real quick if you'd like.
Okay, please do.
Okay,
Thank you, Tammy.
no problem. Regarding a special meeting, public hearing, revisions to Washington zoning regulation section 12.8 temporary uses. You are hereby noticed of a special meeting that will take place on Tuesday, January 12th, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. via Zoom virtual conference for the public hearing regarding revisions to Washington zoning regulation sections 12.8 temporary uses. Zoom information for the meeting will be published to the Town of Washington website. And that's dated December 30th, 2020, revised 1/7/2021, and revised again on 1/12/2021.
Thank you, Tammy. I would like to give some general instructions to the public. I think that we're over 100 in attendance, not counting zoning commissioners and staff. So what I would ask you to do until we open the floor to the public is mute your computers or cell phones or whatever you're doing, however you're communicating with us. And at the time when we open it up to the public, I will ask first those in attendance who have not submitted a written communication to the Land Use Department to say a few words. We have 100 people, times 1 minute each is over an hour and a half. So your comments must be kept brief. Following those who have not sent written communications to the Land Use Department and have a chance to speak, then I will ask those who have written a letter to the Land Use Department to have 1 or 2 minutes. And I believe, so I really don't want to have to cut anybody off, but otherwise we will be here all night. And I think you understand that. I am certain that the commissioners have read all letters up to, I think, received up to roughly 3 to 4 o'clock this afternoon. I know I have. Again, I think the most important part of this public hearing tonight will be to have your comments brief, succinct, to the point, and I promise you we'll get through this.
It just happened.
What?
Out there. Okay. Sorry, screen went off, but it came back.
Okay. Yeah, so mine did something as well.
Okay.
I want to read 12.8 in its entirety. hopefully without interruption. Okay, 12.8 temporary uses. Temporary permits may be issued for certain structures and uses in accordance with the following provisions. 12.8.1, temporary construction structures. When a lot is being prepared for the construction of a permitted permanent structure or the establishment of a permitted permanent use, a permit may be issued for one or more structures to be used solely for A, storage of equipment and materials required for such preparation or construction, or B, a construction office, the zoning officer may issue a temporary permit for up to 2 such structures, provided the structures would meet all setback requirements for a permanent structure. The duration of the first such permit shall be no greater than 1 year or 2 weeks after the completion or preparation or construction of the permanent use or structure, whichever comes first. Permits may be renewed for periods of no more than 6 months. 12.8.2, temporary trailers for living purposes. A permit not to exceed 4 weeks in any calendar year may be issued by the zoning officer for one visiting trailer to be used for living purposes on a lot zoned for residential use. Any such trailer must be parked on the rear half of the lot and must be located at least 25 feet away from every lot line. No more than one such permit shall be issued in any calendar year. 12.8.3, temporary uses requiring no permit whatsoever. A, temporary uses that are incidental and customary to the permitted principal use of a parcel in a residential district. B, annual events that have previously not been issued a zoning permit and have been held at the same location for a period of 5 years or more before, and then we insert the date of this amendment. C, temporary events on property owned by the town of Washington, religious institutions, or schools, Events held by commercial entities in the B1, B2, B3, and B4 districts. 12.8.4, temporary uses requiring a zoning permit. The zoning office enforcement officer may issue a zoning permit for a single day event not listed in subsection A above, provided the applicant demonstrates that adequate parking can be provided. No more than 2 such permits shall be issued in any one calendar year on the same site. All such uses / events shall require a zoning permit and shall be limited to the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. 12.8.5, temporary uses requiring a special permit. A special permit shall be required for any temporary use lasting more than 1 day, not described in sections 12.83 and 12.84. Such use shall be subject to the standards of section 13.1C of these regulations and shall be limited to circuses, carnivals, festivals, concerts, artistic performances, and galas, and similar type entertainment. No more than 1 special permit may be issued in any one calendar year for a temporary use on any lot or parcel. No such temporary use shall be permitted for more than 7 consecutive days. All such uses and events that require a special permit shall be limited to the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's fine. Next, I will read the COG referral. The Council of Governments, Northwest Hills Council of Governments, located in Torrington, Connecticut. Initiating municipality is Washington, date received 11 November 6, 2020. Public hearing date today. Neighboring municipalities in the Northwest Cog region are Kent, Warren, Litchfield, Morris, and Roxbury. Summary of proposed change. This is a proposed revision to section 12.8 of the town zoning regulations, which addresses temporary uses, including temporary structures and temporary events. The revisions proposed in October 2019 have been slightly amended to this current proposed version. Comments from the COG. We continue to be concerned about section 12.8.3b, which states that if an annual event has been held at the same location for a period of 5 years or more before the date this regulation is amended, it may continue to be held without needing a permit. Why do these events not have to comply with the same standards and permitting process that newer events do? Grandfathering uses that had been in existence prior to the effective date of a new regulation is not uncommon, but picking a number of years prior to the effective date is uncommon and could be contested. Continuing. Allowing the supporting arts, culture, and social events in our region would be consistent with our regional plan of conservation and development and regional comprehensive economic development strategy, section 12.8.5, as proposed, limits these types of events to no more than one event per year per parcel. This appears to limit opportunities to hold these types of events with these regional plans, which these regional plans support. This referral response will be sent to the land use administrator and chief elected official in each of the neighboring towns listed above. Questions concerning this referral should be directed to Janelle Mullen of the North Hills Council of Governments. The second referral is the Planning Commissions, from the Planning Commission, dated April 1, 2020. Dear Mr. Solly, the Washington Planning Commission has reviewed and discussed the proposed revisions to the Washington zoning regulations as of 27 February 2020 regarding section 12.8 temporary uses. The Planning Commission unanimously finds that the proposed revisions are inconsistent with the Town of Washington's 2014 Plan of Conservation and Development. The revised section 12.8.1 and 12.8.2 are not inconsistent with the POCD, as the plan does not address temporary structures or trailers. However, portions of the sections 12.8.3 and 12.8.4 and 12.8.5, which address temporary events, impose limits on arts, cultural, and recreational activities that conflict with the POCD, and portions of section 12.8.3 pose threats to the harmonious use of our commercial and institutional properties. Specific issues of concern are noted below. This is not an exhaustive list. 12.8.3b. This clause is arbitrary at best and exclusionary at worst. The Planning Commission believes that grandfathering previously held temporary events by setting a minimum tenure for their existence is discriminatory. There is no purpose in exempting some temporary events over others based solely on longevity that could be considered consistent with the POCD. 12.8.3d. Codifying unlimited and unpermitted temporary events in the business district could have unintended consequences, Section 2.3.2 of the Washington zoning regulations stipulates that, quote, all uses not specifically permitted are prohibited, end quote. And temporary events are not cited as a by right, permitted, or a special permit use in the business district. This clause would allow a property owner in a business district to stage multiple temporary events without regard to incidental or customary use, numbers of days, time constraints, or permitting requirements. Exempting the business district from the permitting process in this manner would conflict with the existing uses in harmony with the purpose of this district. Clauses in the current zoning regulations, section 7.7.1, 8.7.1, 9.7.1, and 10.51A. 12.8.4. This clause would have a chilling effect on future cultural and recreational events. For example, the Steep Rock Association, not covered by proposed sections 12.8.3C and 12.8.3D, would be restricted to 2 additional temporary events per year going forward. This would effectively act as a regulatory constraint on their cultural and recreational growth. 12.8.5, limiting temporary events subject to a special permit to 2 consecutive days eliminates the possibility of any event occurring over 2 weekends. Limiting temporary events subject to a special permit to 7 consecutive days. Excuse me, I misquoted before. Eliminates the possibility of any event occurring over 2 weekends. Presenters of arts and culture events typically offer programming during the weekdays to accommodate the availability of their patrons and the general public. In reality, this clause restricts events to 3 consecutive days unless they occur under sections 12.8.3C or 12.8.3D, in which case there are no restrictions as to the number of consecutive days. The 2014 Plan Conservation and Development clearly and repeatedly indicates that the town of Washington should support and encourage arts, cultural, and recreational activities because, 1, that the town has a long history in doing so, and 2, these events promote economic and community vitality, and 3, they make Washington an attractive place to visit and live. It is difficult to imagine a scenario where the Planning Commission would approve curtailing, limiting, or otherwise restricting these activities without clear rationale. At the other extreme, it is irresponsible to grant the unrestricted use of temporary events to select entities without regard to the general welfare of the community or with intent to promote effectively the town's plan of conservation and development. Quote, or in parentheses, zoning reg 1.3, period. Taken in their entirety, these proposed revisions to the zoning regulations create more problems than they solve. The Washington Planning Commission urges their rejection. Best regards, Wayne Heilman. The third, it's not a referral, but it's a Board of Selectmen letter just received today. Dear zoning commissioners, we believe strongly in the independence of your volunteer boards and commissions and have great respect and appreciation for the countless hours you've all given on behalf of the town of Washington while serving on the zoning commission. We work hard to assist the commissions and lend support in any way we can. We fully understand that any regulation changes are at the discretion of the zoning commission. With that said, we are writing to urge you to reconsider moving forward with the proposed changes to the 12.8 regulations. The unintended consequences and impact on our houses of worship, not nonprofits, cultural community, and countless other organizations could be devastating. As you are all well aware, the Planning Commission has also stated that this proposal is not in keeping with the Plan of Conservation and Development. As we noted above, the Zoning Commission has the authority to make changes to the regulations. However, we encourage you to take into account the statements from our other boards and commissions, town residents, and the countless community organizations opposed to these changes. Please reconsider moving forward with this, and thank you very much for your time and consideration. Washington Board of Selectmen, Jim Britton, Jay Hubblebank, and Dean Sargent. Let's see. At this time, I have asked Janet Hill to speak to the assembled group regarding her rebuttal of the Planning Commission's referral. And her rebuttal was dated August 27th, 2020. Jen, are you there?
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can hear you. Hopefully everybody.
Okay. As I read the many, many letters sent to the commission, I noticed what I believe is a common theme, and that is that the majority of the objections, not all, but the majority, are based on misinformation or misunderstanding. And I'll begin to point these out by addressing one of the more frequent objections cited, and that is that the Zoning Commission ignored the Planning Commission's review and that the proposed language for section 12.8 conflicts with the Plan of Conservation and Development. The following statement that I'm going to read, I wrote in response to the Planning Commission's April 1st, 2020 letter. It was discussed at a zoning meeting, and the zoning commissioners expressed their general agreement. Keep in mind that this was written in August, and the commission subsequently dealt with some of the suggestions raised in it. And while it doesn't address all of the issues in the planning letter, it addresses many. So the letter, my statement is, I was disappointed after reading the Planning Commission's April 1st, 2020 referral regarding zoning's proposed update to section 12.8. I am in general support of zoning's proposed revisions, which isn't to say that I would not support any further revisions that the commission might consider now, but I do support the proposed language for 3 reasons. 1, some of the proposed language clarifies how the regulations have been carried out in the past, writes it down in black and white so there would be no question in the future about standard procedure. There have been major changes in the makeup of both the Land Use Staff and Zoning Commission in the last few years, and rather than leave this section open to future interpretation, I think it is wise to make these specific clarifications now. 2, implementing revisions that clarify the regulations makes it more likely that Section 12.8 will be administered in a consistent manner throughout town. I think it is very important that the zoning regulations are applied fairly and consistently to all applicants. 3, I believe that the administration of the proposed Section 12.8 will help to preserve the residential character of our residential districts and neighborhoods. In its April 1st review, the Planning Commission wrote, and I quote, "It is difficult to imagine a scenario where the Planning Commission would approve curtailing, limiting, or otherwise restricting these activities without a clear rationale. I think one has only to read the 2014 Plan of Conservation and Development to find this clear rationale. While the plan includes and supports a creative economy, it also continues to support the protection of the town's residential character. The 2014 plan states, and these are quotes, "It should be stressed that while Washington pursues the enhancement of its economic base, it should be cautious in undertaking activities that could negatively impact the low-density character of the town's residential neighborhoods. Addressing the town's economic advantage in the arts, entertainment, and recreational activities, the plan states, these activities are important to the town's economic life and should be supported in appropriate locations. And just one further quote, Washington zoning regulations should be reviewed to determine whether they promote or hinder creative and dynamic economic development. The regulations should be revised as necessary to assure a clear and concise pathway for appropriate development projects while still protecting the town's unique village centers, residential districts, and overall character. As a past Planning Commission alternate and as the town's past land use administrator, I helped work on 3 updates of the Plan of Conservation and Development. Preservation of rural character, which I would also describe as the preservation of the residential nature of our residential districts, was and is one of the foremost goals of these plans. I would go so far as to say now that the proposed zoning regulation, which would allow and currently already permits 7-day events in the residential districts, and which proposes to expand the types of temporary activities permitted under Section 12.8 to include festivals, concerts, artistic performances, galas, and similar type entertainment, is extremely supportive of and, in fact, promotes the economic goals of the Plan of Conservation and Development. Add to this that the proposed language would also exempt from permit requirements, A, annual events that have been held at the same location for 5 years or more, and B, temporary events held on property owned by the town, religious institutions, and schools. I find these additional provisions make the proposed Section 12.8 even more supportive of the economic goals of the POCD. The Zoning Commission must also consider, however, the stated purpose of Section 4 of the Washington zoning regulations, which governs the farming residential district. It states, quote, "It is intended that development in this district, which covers most of the town of Washington, will consist primarily of scattered residential, agricultural, and related uses, open space, low-intensity recreational activities, and other uses that will retain the rural character and natural beauty of the town," unquote. Therefore, it is the duty and responsibility of zoning to protect residential neighborhoods. While I think that most Washington residents would welcome the opportunity to attend a 7-day gala, concert, or artistic event, I also think they may not be happy to have such an event conducted next door to their homes. I think that expanding the time limit under Section 12.8 to 7 non-consecutive days or to 10 or more days so that events may be scheduled to last over 2 consecutive weekends could be an unacceptable burden on the majority of our property owners in our residential districts. I disagree with the Planning Commission's opinion stated in its April 1st referral letter, and I apologize for the length of this statement, but also want to respectfully include comments on some of the specific criticisms made by the Planning Commission. Section 12.8.3.b, the provision that annual events that have been held at the same location for a period of 5 years or more require no zoning permit, was the recommendation of Attorney Ziska, Zoning Commission Counsel, on how best to address the many charitable and fundraising events that have been held over the years in town without zoning permits. These include events such as the Horrigan Softball Tournament and Tea for 200, which had never previously been required to get zoning permits. The proposed section, however, does not specify that this section applies only to those annual events that had never previously been required to obtain zoning permits. I recommend this language be added for clarification, and it was. Section 12.8.4. I think the complaint here is the part of the proposed language which states that no more than 2 permits per year may be issued for temporary events on any one site. First, This section would not impact any institution that already operates under an approved special permit. For example, the schools, library, town landmark site, and Steep Rock already have special permits, which already include the many temporary activities and events that will be conducted throughout the upcoming years in support of and associated with these institutions. This section also does not impact temporary events that are customary and incidental to the permitted principal use of a property. For example, holiday celebrations for family and friends, anniversary, birthday and graduation parties, weddings, etc., for all the members of a family would not be limited to 2 per year. For those temporary events that are not customary and incidental to the permitted principal use of a residential property, these would be limited to 2 per year because, as I've already said, it is the Zoning Commission's duty to protect and preserve the residential character of the residential districts. Section 12.8.5. The Planning Commission objected that temporary events would be limited to 7 consecutive days. First, no change is proposed here. This is the current regulation. Second, I've already expressed my opinion on the importance of protecting the residential nature of residential districts and have pointed out that this is also a goal of the Plan of Conservation and Development. Keep in mind that under the special permit standards listed in section 13.1.c, the Zoning Commission must guard against uses that would impair adjacent property values, that could create nuisances on adjoining properties, and/or would be detrimental to or adversely impact the neighborhood or adjoining properties. Lastly, it is possible to implement creative solutions for those who maintain it is essential to the economic and artistic viability of the town that these types of events be permitted to run over 2 weekends. I think that events that endure over 2 weekends could be promoted as town-wide events with the various artistic and concert performances scheduled at different locations throughout town. As an example, the first night or two and/or the last night or two of a 2-weekend event could be scheduled at the Gunnery's New Theater, the Town Pavilion, a church hall, the Town Hall, Montessori School, the Chapag Auditorium, etc., etc. These are locations, even those located in residential districts, where public events are welcome, usual, customary, and expected. The use of these locations would draw more event goers into the town centers where our local businesses are located, and so would be more beneficial to them and would contribute more to the town's local economy. Section 12.8 could further be revised to include incentives to hold these types of temporary events, not in the middle of residential districts, but at institutions, on public property, or at locations where well-attended public events have been customary. In conclusion, I stress that the proposed section 12.8 supports and promotes the economic and artistic goals of the Plan of Conservation and Development, while at the same time it protects the rural and residential character of Washington's residential neighborhoods and districts. The Washington Zoning Commission should not choose to do one or the other. It is the Commission's responsibility to promote and to protect both.
Thank you,
That's it.
Jane. At this time, I would like to call on my fellow zoning commissioners if they have any comments at this time. Deborah, did you have some specific comments that you want to make at this time?
No, I'd just like to listen to what the public has to say and then maybe make a comment after that.
Okay, that's fine. Any other commissioner have anything to add at this moment?
Yeah, I was very impressed when I read 2 days ago Janet's summary of our history and where we are and the current proposed solution. I think it makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Janet.
You're welcome.
I think right now, Mike, I'd like to bring you into the conversation, and if you could shed some light on a couple of issues, specifically with 12.8.3, the 12.83. Well, let's just start out with 12.83A. Temporary uses that are incidental and customary to the permitted principal uses of a parcel in a residential district, and these do not require any permit. Could you just expand a little bit on the breadth to which I think we can include so many events that I think the public would be very curious?
Okay, Nick, before we do that, just as an administrative thing, you
Yep.
probably should read the letter, the second letter from the Planning Commission that was dated December 2, just to fulfill that administrative requirement.
Okay.
Do you
Yes,
have that, Nick? Because if you don't, I do.
Yes, Shelley, could you read that? Thank you.
So the follow-up letter, because of all the times we had to reschedule this, is dated December 2nd, 2020, addressed to Nick Solly, Chair, from Wayne Heilman, Chair of the Planning Commission, regarding referral of proposed revisions to zoning regulations section 12.8. It reads, Mr. Solly, the Washington Planning Commission has reviewed and discussed the proposed revisions to the Washington zoning regulations as of 4 November 2020 regarding section 12.8 temporary uses. The Planning Commission unanimously finds that the proposed revisions are inconsistent with the Town of Washington's 2014 Plan of Conservation and Development, POCD. The issues outlined in the April 1st, 2020 referral letter regarding these proposed sections, these proposed sections 12.8 revisions remain unaddressed. The Commission unanimously urges the rejection of these proposed revisions. Best regards, Wayne Heilman, Chair of the Washington Planning Commission.
Thank you, Shelley. And Mike, thanks for bringing that up.
All right.
But
yeah.
as far as your version of what incidental and customary uses are to a principal use such as a residential home.
Okay, I'd be glad to do that, and I'd like to start that, Nick, by first saying a little bit more about the history of this. For those of you, there are obviously many people online right now. Probably a good many of you don't have any other background in this area or on what the commission has been doing and so forth. I've been the commission's land use attorney for, I believe, over 20 years now. And so have been familiar with this concern from the beginning. Part of this arose because it was brought to the attention of the commission that events were being held that were not residential in nature, per se, and the question was, what do we do about it? Are they authorized by the zoning regulations now, or are they not? And how do we deal with those? And so one of my first tasks was to take a look at your existing section 12.8 regarding temporary uses. And what your current regulation says is there are a couple of things regarding temporary buildings or trailers, and I won't go into those because I don't think those are controversial or the changes to those. But what your regulation says right now, and I think it's important for everybody to understand this, because I think most of the letters I've read, and I have read almost all of the letters that were submitted, and including the letters from the Planning Commission, there's a suggestion that what's going on now is legal, and that what the commission is doing is tightening up what can be done legally. And in fact, in my opinion, the opposite is true. What your regulation says right now is temporary permits may be issued by the zoning enforcement officer for the following uses if in his judgment, the public convenience and welfare can be substantially served and the appropriate use of neighboring property would not be substantially or permanently injured. 12.8.1, a circus, carnival, or similar type entertainment for a period of not more than 7 days. Now, I'm looking at that as the commission's land use lawyer and saying, what do I think about that regulation? And I have to tell you, and I've expressed this to the commission before in meetings that have been public, I don't believe this regulation is lawful because under state law, and state law governs what every local land use commission can do, including Washington Zoning Commission. Under state law, the discretion that is seemingly being given to the zoning enforcement officer is far too broad. It's not something that is allowed by state law. State law says that when you make regulations for a particular district, all of the properties within that district have to be treated the same way. And then the state law says the regulations can allow special permits or special exceptions for commissions to decide for certain types of uses that may be okay on one property in a district, but not on another property. So that's something that's committed to the zoning commission to do, not to the zoning enforcement officer. And state law says if the zoning commission is going to do that, it has to have a public hearing. But this regulation says, no, we're going to let our zoning enforcement officer make a determination of what kinds of uses can go on which properties in the residential district at his or her whim, basically. As long as he or she feels that it's appropriate, he or she can permit it. And if they don't have to permit it. I don't think there's any way in heck that a superior court or any court in Connecticut would uphold that as a lawful regulation. That is discretion that is beyond the power of a zoning enforcement officer under state law. And yet that's all that Washington has right now to allow temporary uses. So in my opinion, the kinds of temporary uses that are things that are other than customary and incidental uses of property, a customary and incidental use to residences or customary and incidental use to businesses. If it's not one of those customary and incidental uses, it's not allowed under your regulations. And I also have to say, it was pointed out in one of the letters. In fact, I think in the Planning Commission's letter, it said that under your regulations, if it's not expressly allowed in the zoning regulations, then it isn't allowed. Well, oddly enough, your regulations don't expressly allow customary and incidental uses of property. And yet, I mean, Washington has accepted for many years that if it's a customary and incidental use, we want to allow it. We don't want to stop people from having parties at their houses. We don't want to stop people from having a wedding reception or something at their house, or inviting people over for a pool party or something like that. That's not what we intended, but your regulations don't say that. Your regulations don't say it. So you've got these problems with the existing regulation. Now, even if the delegation to the zoning enforcement officer was legal, and as I said, I don't think it is, but even if it was, the only thing he or she can permit is a circus, a carnival, or a similar type entertainment. Well, what is similar to a circus or carnival? I mean, if you were to ask a court about that, the court's going to say, well, how are a circus and a carnival similar? Well, they're the kind of traveling itinerant events that blow into town for, a weekend or whatever, and then they blow out of town, they go somewhere else. Those are circuses and carnivals. The kinds of events that people seem to be most concerned about, the artistic events and so forth, those are not even covered. These are not even allowed in this regulation, literally, even if it were legal to begin with. So you've got big, big problems with this regulation. And if you want to support the arts in your community and allow these events to happen, the best thing to do is to create a regulation that says they are allowed and here's how we're going to regulate them. So now let's go to that 12.8.1 or 12.8.3A. Temporary uses that are incidental and customary to the permitted principal use of a parcel in a residential district. There, for the first time, is in the language of the regulations, something that says if you have an incidental and customary use, you can do it. You needed to have that. You really needed to have that in your regulations, and it's there for the first time. So I guess I'm a little surprised to have somebody say, well, gee, this is not, that's not a good thing to have that in the regulations. I think you really needed to have it in the regulation, so it would be very clear that you didn't mean to prohibit it. The temporary uses that are incidental and customary to a permitted principal use, those are the kinds of things that the commission and the enforcement agent will be allowed to use discretion on, because the regulations are stating what's allowed: temporary, customary, and incidental uses. The courts have familiarity with dealing with those definitions, and they recognize that it's kind of a case-by-case decision. So what's customary and incidental to a residential use? Well, I mean, in Washington, people have typically had, wedding receptions or pool parties or whatever kind of parties, maybe political gatherings, maybe fundraising events at their homes for things that they support. If those have been customary and incidental in Washington, as it sounds like they have, they're permitted. They're now expressly permitted under these regulations, whereas under the existing regulation, they're not. So that's a big difference. If I might just continue with this, Nick.
Yes, please.
Annual events that have previously not been, or that have previously not been issued a zoning permit and have been held at the same location for a period of 5 years or more. The Planning Commission talked about this. Well, it's not fair. You're grandfathering those, but you're not grandfathering others, or some other people complained about that. But really, that's not what's happening. The reason that I crafted the regulation that way, and I did craft it, and I do think it is an unusual regulation. With that, I'll agree. It is an unusual regulation, but my job is to try to figure out how to craft a regulation that will work for the town and do what the town is looking for. And here's the problem. Grandfathering is conferred by state law and federal law, not by the town. Grandfathering is something that happens because of state and federal law. And what it says is, if you've been lawfully conducting a use on your property for a long enough period of time that it's known in the neighborhood as a use that's associated with that property, and it's been done lawfully for all of that time, then if the zoning commission changes the regulations, that change will not affect the ability of that property owner to continue those uses just as they existed prior to the change in regulations. So that's, again, that's a right that's conferred by state and federal law. But the problem is, just as I said, it's a case-by-case analysis. What does it mean that a use has to be conducted for a long enough period of time to be considered to be established at that property? It's hard enough when you've got a use that's going on for a long time, but when you have a use that only happens once a year, it's even more problematic. At what point does that use become so associated with that property that people say, oh yeah, we recognize that that's an established use at that property? Now, the problem is, if the town were to say, all right, if the town didn't have a regulation like this and was to say, all right, we've got a piece of property where a special event has been conducted for X amount of years, and do we go after that or not? Is that a use that was lawful? Should we try to enforce the regulations against that? And when you try to enforce the regulations, it means issuing a cease and desist order, going to the zoning board of appeals, probably going to court, spending lots and lots and lots of money on people like me arguing about whether it's permitted or not permitted. And then the judge has to figure out, based on the evidence, okay, for this particular situation, do I consider that grandfather? Do I not consider that grandfather? So the purpose of 12.8.3b was to say, essentially, for purposes of enforcement, if a use has been going on without any complaints from the town for 5 years or more, it's probably the kind of event that we think is grandfathered. We think if it's been going on that long, it's probably grandfathered. And even if it isn't, even if some judge might find that it's not grandfathered, we don't want to spend tens of thousands of dollars in court to have a judge figure that out. We would just as soon say, look, if we've been allowing it for 5 years and it's not been a big problem for those 5 years, we're not going to go after it. That's kind of what this is saying. If it's been going on for less than 5 years, then the commission will have an enforcement decision to make. Do we take this to court or do we allow it not to go to court? But so the point is, for anything that's less than 5 years, it still could be grandfathered under state law. The only difference is the commission will retain discretion within that period of 5 years to determine whether they think it's worth going after, whether they should enforce the regulations against that use. And after 5 years, the commission is just making a decision. That's going to be our cutoff. We're not going to go after anything that's been going on for 5 years or more without any complaints for the town. So is that arbitrary? Yes, it is arbitrary, but it's arbitrary only in an enforcement sense. And the commission would have to make that decision anyway. The commission could make that decision without putting it into a regulation. The commission could say, look, I mean, as far as we're concerned, if it's been going on for 5 years, we're not going after it. They could do that as a matter of policy, but at least if you put it in the regulation, people know that, if you've been doing it for 5 years or more, you're pretty safe. That's why that's there.
Mike, could I just interrupt?
Sure.
Does the case law in Connecticut recognize 5 years differently than some lesser number, or as you say, it's totally arbitrary?
It's totally arbitrary. Well, I shouldn't say arbitrary. It's case by case, because like I said, if you had a situation with, let's say you had a situation where a person was conducting a home occupation, and the home occupation was legal and it was going on for 3 months or something like that. And then the regulations changed to disallow home occupations. That 3-month period would be easily sufficient to constitute a grandfathered use. The problem here, as I said, is that you're talking about uses that happen only for a few days each year. And so the courts require for a grandfathered use that it be known in the neighborhood, that the property sort of be known in the neighborhood for that use. And the problem is, if you have, somebody who had a festival at their property for 3 days, and, maybe the neighbors were away for those 3 days and didn't know about it, all of the neighbors, whatever. And then the person does it again the next year. Do you want that person to come in and say, well, I did it last year and nobody complained, therefore I'm grandfathered? Well, probably no. But how about if it happened for 2 years in a row and there was no complaint? And so there just isn't any case law in Connecticut that distinguishes between what's a point of cutoff for grandfathering for uses that have happened only sporadically on the property. There haven't been any cases that really deal with that. But what the courts would be looking for is some consistency, some kind of a pattern. And in my view, you can't have a pattern unless you've been doing this sporadic use for at least several years in a row.
How would the zoning commission differentiate between 1283A, incidental and customary uses to a house or a resident in the residential district. And the type of uses for a, in 1284, that a single day event not listed in subsection A, which we just discussed, but does this become sort of, again, discretionary on the zoning commission as to what one does not need a permit for and what one needs to go to this EO and just basically with a parking plan because they're having, maybe an event at one's home, but it may have 50 or 100 cars attending.
Yeah.
It's the intensity of what happens in the residential district that may determine whether you don't need a permit because it's low keyed and it's at your home and it's a typical customary residential activity versus something else that is much more intense and with much more people attending and a lot of cars and so forth.
Yeah, Nick, it is still a matter of discretion and all, for the most part, customary and incidental uses are always subject to those kinds of discretion. Ironically, I mean, that discretion typically does rely or does reside in a zoning enforcement officer. Typically, it's a zoning enforcement officer who's asked to decide whether this is a customary and incidental use. And there's no black and white to those kinds of things. At what point does something that is a customary and incidental use morph into something else? To give you an example of that, you can take two sort of, not really extremes, but you can take two very, very different situations. In the first situation, a homeowner is saying, I'm going to have 50 friends over for a pizza party because I just graduated from some school or something like that. So I'm going to have 50 or even 100 friends over to celebrate this graduation. Well, that's not that unusual for people to have even a big party at a residence for, a really special event like that, something that happens infrequently in that family. And, so you might look at that and say, oh, yeah, that's a customary and incidental use. Now you say, okay, now we're going to have an event on that property where they're going to invite some band to come in, and the people at the house are going to allow anybody who wants to come to see that band to come, but they're going to have to pay a parking fee or something like that. So they're ending up making a little bit of money on that. Now it'd be pretty easy to say, that's not really a customary and incidental use. Between those two, there is a range of possibilities. It could be the person is saying 50, I'm going to invite 50 people over to see this band. I'm not going to charge anything for it, but it's not associated with anything in particular. I just want to have this band and I want to have all of these people come over. Somebody might look at that and say, well, that's not really a customary and incidental use, because if you think about it, just think about it. If you say that is a customary and incidental use, that means the person can do it basically every single day. Every single day, that person could have 50 people over with a band playing. And at that point, the neighbor's going to get a little freaked out. So you have to look at, is it in the nature of a use that is typically associated with the property? There are most of those kinds of things we can all appreciate that homeowners can do. And like I said, weddings, graduation events, birthday parties, things like that. Even, I'm going to have my hiking group come over for a party. I'm going to have the Washington Republicans come over for an event. I'm going to have, something like that. I'm going to have some people come over from the Nature Conservancy, and I'm going to ask people to contribute to the Nature Conservancy while we're there. Those are all things that arguably you could say are customary and incidental. But trying to define them, trying to list every single one of those uses would be a pretty hard thing to do. So where to draw the line? It's a case-by-case analysis. And again, the only thing I can say is right now, your regulations don't even literally allow any customary and incidental uses other than the specific ones that are laid out in the regulations, which don't include birthday parties or anything like that. So like I said, this would be the first regulation that actually literally allows them.
Yep. And briefly, can you just reiterate a little bit about the 7-day event?
Yep.
The fact that 7 days has been in our regulations for 30, 40 years, and your interpretation not only of what that 7-day event means, but also your 2 briefs to the town explaining your what you thought about that.
Right. And as I said before, Nick, right now, the regulation says a circus, carnival, or similar type entertainment. And when the courts look at those kinds of things and try to figure out what do you mean by similar type of entertainment, what they're going to do is look at the other things, the specific things that are listed, and try to figure out how are they related? What is similar about those 2 types of uses? And circuses and carnivals, a lot of people think of them kind of the same way. I mean, if the Ringling, not the Ringling Brothers, but if, one of those traveling carnival type things is coming into town, a lot of people don't really distinguish between that and a circus, although, a circus really is kind of a different thing. But the nature of them is they're uses that typically come into town maybe once a year, and then they leave town. They set up, they do their thing, and then they leave. And so if you're talking about a circus or carnival for a period of not more than 7 days, well, circuses and carnivals don't come into town for a day and then go away, and then come back a week later for a day and then go away. And so you're talking about the types of events that happen in a block of time that is no longer than 7 days. That's how I interpreted that regulation. Again, if it had said a circus, carnival, artistic event or something, if it had broader language, I might have said something different. But circus and carnival, it's hard for me to argue that that was intended to allow something that could happen on 7 separate days over the course of a year.
Thank you. I want to open up the floor to the public at this point. And as I said earlier, first, I would like to hear from those very briefly about who have not submitted a written communication to the Land Use Department. And Tammy, I'm going to have to rely on you to, I guess, pick and choose here.
Okay. The first person I am going to call is First Selectman Jim Britton.
Okay.
Tammy, thank you. Hope everyone can hear me. Chairman Solly, zoning commissioners, thank you. I just want to make a quick few points. We're over an hour into this and we've not heard one comment from the public, and I think that's shameful. There was no need to drone on like this. My second comment is we as elected officials are here to do the will of the people of Washington. Our opinions have to take a back seat. We are here to do what is most important to the people of Washington. And frankly, our council, our commissions need to reflect that and help us achieve that, not work against us. This is a situation where there is an overwhelming resistance to this regulation. What I would hope we would get from legal counsel, from the zoning commission, is a method of how we can achieve our goals. But the simple fact is nobody can tell me that this regulation change, this proposed change is not exactly targeted to the five senses. I just simply, I don't want to go in any other direction. This is important to the people of Washington. We as elected officials, I walk into my office every day. My feelings are irrelevant. What's most important is what is the will of the residents of the town of Washington. And everything else that follows is how do we achieve that goal? That's all that's important. And that's all I want to say. I mean, you know, you've read the statement from the Board of Selectmen. We absolutely respect our volunteers. We appreciate how much they do. But if we ignore that and we act on our own instincts, our own impulses, our own feelings, we've just shirked the duty of our office. And I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy?
Yes, next we have Robert Hackney.
And I would just like to say thanks very much to First Selectman Brenton, because I think he encapsulated what many of us feel. Chairman Solly, you know, a year and a half ago in October, I stood up at this public meeting and I said, I think this regulation is attempting to hit a fly with a sledgehammer. It's only gotten worse, quite frankly. Attorney Ziska took 35 minutes to try to explain why this could fit and be the right idea. And at the end of the day, the right thing to do is to leave the discretion with the commission as to what is temporary or permitted uses. It's not with the zoning enforcement officer. It is with the commission. You are our elected officials and we trust you. You have made the right decision over the last 3 years. We trust you to make the right decision. Again, it will be the right thing for the town, and thank you for doing that. Let's all try to pull together here. We all want the town to succeed, to have a successful and collaborative environment that can support our businesses, our people, and our arts. And you've done that, and we appreciate it. And we don't think there's any need at all to change the regulations today. Let's leave them as they are. There's no push to do that. Simply leave the discretion with the commission. Thanks very much for hearing me out.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Hackney. Tammy?
Next, we have Michelle Balfour.
Okay, Michelle.
I am speaking on behalf as the president of the Washington Club, and thank you so much to all the volunteers. I'm sure it's a terribly great deal of work. I did want to ask Attorney Ziska, what is the history of state enforcement against inconsistent regulations in municipalities? And what is the limitation on a municipality appealing to a state to say, we don't want these regulations?
The answer is that the state typically doesn't get involved in these. This usually comes to court in the form of neighbor versus neighbor disputes. We've had one going on in Washington on another matter that has gone on for years and years and cost, again, tens of thousands of dollars to the town of Washington. And part of it is because of ambiguities in the regulations. That's typically what it's caused by. So the state won't get involved, but if you get a neighbor that's hacked off by a regulation and decides they want to challenge it because it's not a lawful regulation, then the town can end up in that process. So that was part of the reason for seeking a change.
Ms. Balfour, are you done?
No, I mean, I have a follow-up. It just seems to me there must be a cleaner way to do this by doing it as a noise regulation or some sort of nuisance regulation. If what you're saying is true, that something is grandfathered, then I can't wait for the Washington Club to do all kinds of interesting things on the golf course, which is not currently permitted now under the zoning regulations. So clearly that regulation must be illegal under what's been presented today. So I don't know. I don't think I understand. So, but I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. Tammy?
Yes, we have, and I can't read the full last name, but I believe it's Giampietro.
Yep. Yes. Matilda?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you. First of all, thank you everybody for the work you do. I appreciate it. I really, I'm not sure quite how to make this balance here between protecting rural and residential nature of our residential districts, which I value, and supporting the arts and cultural events in our town, which are the lifeblood of the community and an economic engine for the town of Washington. Unfortunately, this zoning commission ruled in favor of allowing Wickham Rise across the street from me 24 outdoor tented events per season, which would devastate the residential character of our neighborhood for the financial benefit of one person. Why would the zoning commission deny permits for cultural and artistic and social events which benefit the entire community of Washington? Thank you.
Thank you. Good point. Tammy,
Next, we have Mr. Ingracia.
Tim,
You can go ahead, Mr. Ingracia.
Is he unmuted?
Says he's unmuted.
Hello?
Oh, there we go. There he is.
Hello? Okay.
hi, Tim.
Hi. I had submitted a letter, so I don't feel the need to repeat it. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I may believe that all of this is targeted directly at 5 senses. I commend you that you're also trying to answer a broader question. Just for clarity, I wanted to observe it just doesn't work to have 5 senses if it's one weekend. If it's 2 weekends, it does work. And because of the dialogue with the town, will have now been permitted by this commission or by zoning or by the town 4 times. Unfortunately, not the arbitrary 5 that creates grandfathering, but we will have been permitted by a town that could have not granted the permit 4 times. And over the course of that time period, because of the dialogue with the town, we found a way to make it work over 2 weekends instead of what originally was 3. I do think this is all directed at that. I think the history suggests that it's directed at that. But I just wanted to observe, to be very clear, it doesn't work with the setup costs, et cetera, to be a 1 weekend event. It does work 7 days spread over 10. So that was one of the recommendations I had made to consider. The last observation that I made to consider is this arbitrary cap of 2 for the individual day permits. If it's a problem, don't grant more, but retain discretion, which is what I think you have now. And of course, a 10 p.m. limit. I love going to bed early, but I'm not sure how realistic a 10 p.m. limit really is. And so I'd certainly make the observation there perhaps ought to be some discretion there as well. But we're big believers in rules, and there's consequences of decisions, and I just wanted to share those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
Yep.
Yes, next we have Mr. Bond. And I'm just going to ask everybody, before you speak, please state your name and your address for public record. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Bond, 10 Titus Road, Washington Depot. I just wanted to sort of remind everybody that some of these events, they may be, I'm just going to take a wild stab here in the dark. I'm going to say it's less than 15 days out of 365 days. We have a wonderful town. We have a wonderful community, and I would like to thank all of you guys for doing such hard work. And the work that you do is very important, and I'm very appreciative of it. But on that note, I would like to just let everyone know that these events do bring in revenue for businesses in town. that do help us get through the very quiet winter months. And with everybody loving the town as much as I know everyone does, I think we have to keep in mind that without some of these events, the revenue for the shops to keep them open will not quite be there. And I think we could lose what we have and what the town has been building over the last 3 to 4 years. It's going in a really great direction. Businesses are thriving, and I just would hate to see something make this sort of go the other direction. I really do find it important to have these events. Like I said, it's 350 days a year of peace and quiet, and maybe 15 if we could all just maybe sort of overlook them. 11 o'clock's not so late, but I understand that people do want to go to bed. I actually fall asleep pretty early myself, but I just wanted to sort of let everybody know that these do help local businesses survive through the winter. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Scott. Preferably, I want to hear from people who have not submitted written correspondence to the land use office right now. Anybody else, Tammy?
I am seeing P. Clem. I'm assuming Peter Clem.
I believe it is. Peter?
Yes, quite frankly, I think the letters reflect my opinions, and I think I'm going to stand down. I appreciate everything everybody's doing. I think there's got to be a happy compromise in this, quite frankly. So I would do it, but I do thank everybody for all of your time. I think the letters are extremely thoughtful, and I appreciate everybody's comments, and I appreciate the board and everybody. I think Jim Britton summed up a lot of my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Tammy.
Well, I'm not seeing, okay, so.
Josephine Dobkin.
Hold on one second. We have Miss Valerie Friedman.
Hi. I think it's possible to accomplish some of these objectives and support the arts in our community without imposing on residential properties. Our small town has 17 locations with public spaces available to nonprofit organizations, 2 public schools, 3 private schools, town hall, town pavilion, Judy Black Park, Gun Memorial Library, 6 churches, 2 clubs. These locations should be a priority for events, since these locations do not intrude on the quality of life of town residents. And if people can't do it in one weekend, then they should use their property for one weekend and use some of these public spaces for the second weekend. We're very fortunate to have all these options. Let's use them. Preserving rural character should be #1, and the feelings of neighbors have to be taken seriously. Thank you.
Can I speak?
Valerie Friedman, 36 West Morris Road. 36 West Morris Road, Washington, Connecticut.
Thank you.
Tammy, could I speak?
Yes, but I can't see who you are right now.
Oh, sorry. Catherine Carver Root. I own KMR Arts at 2 Titus Road. Here in the depot.
Yeah, Kathy, you did submit a written comments to the board. Yeah, so
I did, yes.
Then
I guess I would just like to say there are amazing venues here in town that do incredible events. But I also feel like if there's another venue that wants to create something really special, I think that all of the venues that exist are well used and beautifully executed in terms of what they do and how they contribute back to the community. But I also feel like there's no harm in adding more layers to the cake. And if there are people who are willing to create these incredible events and experiences, in addition to the ones that already exist, that's the evolution of a town. We can't just sort of get stuck in one place. So I'd like to applaud, people who are trying to do new things and trying to create new experiences and new draws for people to come here and spend money in the shops. And I'm a business owner, so I, really would welcome that. And that's what I would like to say.
Great, thank you.
Nick. Yeah. Hello.
Oh,
Joe
Dobkin.
Yeah, Joe Dobkin. I'm Josephine Dobkin. I live at 220 Beebrook Road. My property is just up the hill from Five Senses, and I can only say that it does affect me tremendously. I have never been approached. I don't know if my other neighbors have, but I've certainly never been approached by the Ingracias in a neighborly way right from the start to say that this is what's been going to be going on. Frankly, the music, they might as well be all sitting and playing on my front lawn. I have people up for weekends for the summer. I've had my house for 45 years more, actually. I have people up, and for several years, for 3 weekends in a row, it would be, oh no, now here they go again. So I can only say, if we could look at, I'm all for the arts. I work in the arts. I have worked in the arts for years. And I've been so supportive of everything artistic in this town. But I do think, as Janet said, that we do have to think about the neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods. And so basically, I realize it's probably a losing proposition, but I would beg that at 10 o'clock, we could stop the music so that we could get a bit of rest and have nice conversations on my deck without having to listen to music that I actually don't want to hear. I don't mind the other programs. I don't mind the morning yoga, but do have a little thought for the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, Nick?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. It's Doug Hamilton. I did not submit a letter. And so I would appreciate.
Could you give your address, please?
Yeah. My name is Doug Hamilton. I live at 183 West Shore Road. All I want to say is that I thought that Jim Britton stated it wonderfully. I think Peter seconded it, and I would say it again. Why is it that this cannot be put to a vote of the community to determine if this is a marginal situation, or if as I suspect, there is overwhelming support to do this for all the reasons we've heard and stated all the writers? That's simple. Why don't we just put this to a vote of the community?
Thank you for your thought. Yep. Tammy?
I'm not seeing anybody else, but that
Okay.
doesn't mean that there's not. Oh, I
I-
see one right now. Hold on.
Yeah, I want to interrupt just for a second, and I have, I want Janet to just read another communication for the file, please.
I would like to read another, my thoughts on having read those letters, but I'm taking Jim Britton's comments to heart, and I don't want to use up all the time. So,
Okay.
Let's see how it goes.
Janet, we'll continue with public comment, and we'll see what hour of the day we are at the end of public comment, and then maybe you can insert your comments at that point.
Okay.
Okay? Okay, Tammy, we'll take now comments from anybody.
Yes, Mr. Simon Metz.
Yes, hi, Simon Metz, 104 River Road. Very short comment and I guess question. I find it very strange that people are dancing around the subject of a very simple noise ordinance. Unbeknownst to some people in the town, in government, there are many, many towns in the state of Connecticut that have simple noise ordinances, which solve the issue of who's doing what, where they're doing it. If we have a neighbor who has an event and they stop at 10 o'clock and they don't go above a certain decibel range, which the state of Connecticut does specify in statute, why is that not what we're going around? The reason I mention this is There's been a lot of complaints, and Jim Britton had a great meeting, I think it was 2 months ago, about noise. That's the underlying issue that we're all talking, and I feel we're dancing around the real question of, we don't want, when there are leaf blowers or machinery going on a Sunday evening or on a weeknight, late at night. Why is that just not put a simple noise ordinance in place? Everyone will be happy. Thank you.
I couldn't agree with you more about that. As chair of the zoning commission, I get complaints all the time about noise on Sunday. And it should be an ordinance, not a zoning regulation. And specifically because in order to take noise readings, one has to be out in the weekend. We don't have our enforcement officer to do that. And quite frankly, I'm not really interested in doing that myself. The constables and the state police simply say, if your neighbor is making too much noise, to call them. The police will come down, just advise the neighbor who's making the noise that they need to, cut it off at 10 o'clock and just to lower the noise. And and as far as a town ordinance, I think you're on to something, and I think we should pursue that. Tammy.
Yes,
Tammy?
Mr. Kessler?
Yes, hi. It's Larry Kessler, 105 West Mountain Road. I have a question for the commission, so I'll direct it to Mr. Solly. So when there's an overwhelming sentiment in the town for something one way or the other, does that affect the judgment of you and the commission, or do you just do what you want to do based on the regulations and how you interpret them?
Speaking for myself, it absolutely affects how I consider or will consider enacting a regulation. No question. Any other commissioner want to add anything?
Well, I can add that having read yes, I take into account the opinions in the letters, and I've read them all. However, I find that many of the objections are based on misinformation, so I have to take that into account also.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, weigh in on that.
Yep, Dave.
Yeah, I've read all the letters and everything as well. We were, the 5 senses may have stimulated this, but this is not, many of our complaints that I heard in their letters or read in the letters, we're dealing with things that people think cannot occur anymore. And I think that is misinformation. We were very conscious and cognizant of not having, casualties by the wayside, things that are unintended casualties of making these regulations. We didn't want to stop anything that's going on. There are lots of great things, benefits, that people are doing out of the goodness of their hearts. And we have no intentions of stopping anything like that, although a lot of the letters focused on that. If there's somebody out there that's still awake and listening, if you have a specific event that you think is not going to happen, is prevented by these regulations, I'd like to know about it, because we certainly do take into account everybody's viewpoint. And I also take into account people that I talk to, not necessarily at meetings, people I've known around town for 50 years. And this is a great thing to have all these people come out to a meeting and write letters, and that's good. And but there's another large segment of the community that we listen to as well. So if there's something specific that you fear is going to be missing with this regulation, please tell me.
Thanks, Dave.
This is Mary Metz from 104 River Road. In terms of something specific that would be missing, I think it is targeted at 5 senses. So that would be missing. And I can tell you that we have invited friends and family to come for those weekends, and they have then spent money in the town that we otherwise wouldn't have spent. And furthermore, I also think there are potential other events that people might decide not to pursue in Washington if what's really focused on is things that you've been done in the past without regard for innovation in the future.
Tammy? Tammy?
One second, Dimitri. First, we have Torrance Robinson.
Hi all, Torrance Robinson at 91 Nelson Hollow. I'll be brief. First, just again, thank you everyone. This is a somewhat thankless job at times and really appreciate everyone's thoughtful commitment to it. To take a quick moment to second Mr. Metz's comments about the noise. And it sounds like in some ways that is at the core of Ms. Dobkin's issues with 5 cent. I'm not sure this is going to be solved in this case, but ultimately, as the president of the Nelson Hollow Association, the #1 complaint we have is around noise, everything from construction to parties, to Airbnbs that are rented out and people have big parties, to shooting that happens with very large caliber rifles. So I would encourage us to, if possible, look at or come up with noise regulations that could be enforced or at least understood by the community, and that might allow us to continue with such things as 5 cent or other endeavors. Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Remski.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a member of the Planning Commission, but I'm not going to speak to the Planning Commission's letters to the Zoning Commission. I think they can stand on their own merits. I will say that I never gave a party that would have fit into the regulations of Mr. Ziska's criteria. Unfortunately, as some of you may well know, those parties exceeded every single criteria that Mr. Ziska pointed out, but that's okay. I did do them over 5 years and they were more than twice a year, but that's all right also. I've retired from the party giving events, I'm sorry to tell everyone. However, my point is more to respond to things that have been said, Mr. Hockney and Selectman Britton, and also to Mr. Ziska. I think his summation and his rationale for working his way through the regulations that we're all concerned about was very thoughtful and very precise and well considered. And I think the problem from my point of view is that we didn't approach this initially from a holistic view. We went at what we had and then we tried to rejigger it in some way to make it a rational system of regulation. And I think that's not a bad approach, but I think what we should have perhaps done is looked at things. For example, Mr. Ziska pointed out that we had a regulation that allowed for circuses and so forth and so on. Although I missed the circus, I understand that that was a regulation that was set up at a time entirely different than the world we live in now. So from my point of view, I think we should have looked at a way to create a simpler and yet effective regulatory set of criteria for the events and things that we're trying to manage. But if we try to micromanage it, we immediately get into the conflict that we're hearing all over the place. And that is that, well, about this, what about that? What about the church fair? Blah, 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 blah. I think we needed to find a simpler language that would give us, and when I mean us, I mean the town, and more specifically the zoning regulations, an ability to be flexible and to use their judgment. The town trusts their judgment to make things. That's why we have special permits. And the reason special permits exist is because we trust the commission to make a judgment about what is valued as a special permit in a certain circumstance, in a certain place. And I think that's a very powerful tool, and we entrust the commission with that power. And I think if we had a baseline that was relatively thought through but simple and not cluttered by the past regulations, that was rethought and renewed, we might be able to address some of the concerns that the citizens have expressed in terms of not curtailing what could be a future event that would benefit the town. I think I'll leave it at that. And if I ever decide to have a New Year's Eve party or a Halloween party, I'll let you all know. Thank you, Mr. Ziska. I think your thoughts were very well taken.
And I appreciate the effort you put into it. That's
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
Henry. Tammy,
Yes. I'm not seeing any hands.
I'd like to make a comment.
certainly, Deborah.
Deborah Radosevich, I'm a commissioner, but I'm also at 40 Revere Road. You need that. I object to the fact that people think this was brought on by the Five Senses Festival, because it wasn't. It was brought on by a complaint about the Five Senses Festival. Neighbors were upset that they had to listen to this. First of all, a lot of construction noise, a lot of cars, a lot of activity, and this that destroyed what they considered their little bucolic, summer evening. I appreciate the Five Senses Festival. I went to the festival. I had a great time, and I'll go again. I don't have any problems with that, but I think as a commission, we have to also think about somebody in an adjoining neighborhood of our own, say a property next door to us, having a Wicca festival, or having a white supremacist festival, or having some of the other things. If we allow some things, we have to allow a lot of other things. And while everyone rallies around the Five Senses, we're really looking at a bigger picture of what should be allowed in the residential district till what time of night, how many nights of the week. We can have the Five Senses Festival for 7 days. What we're saying is, in a residential district, do they have the right to obstruct other people's right to have a quiet drink on their back deck after 7 days? I think that's starting to infringe on people's property and the values of their property when they try to sell it, perhaps. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Deborah.
Tammy.
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes. So this is Mr.
Steve Solly. Hi, guys. We've all been through this for a long, long period of time. And you guys have worked incredibly hard. I understand that. I've been here, served on a lot of boards. Two quick things. One is, I'm going to say the same thing I said last time and maybe the time before. And that is, oh, by the way, I'm 142 Judea Cemetery Road.
I know that.
Washington, Connecticut. But it is a couple of things. Throwing the baby out with the bathwater, we've said this now numerous times. You're hearing it again and again and again. I'm hoping that because I've been to not only all these hearings, but also the meetings in between, to know that the commission as a whole is fairly fixed on what they are going to do here. And so therefore, I don't want to waste my time or anybody else's time. But I just want everybody to understand that this is what you see in front of you is what I think is going to actually happen. I'm not speaking here from a point of view of Steep Rock Association, which I'm a trustee. That is like ASAP, like the Indian Institute, like others, is sort of part of that baby. You guys have not answered that yet. And what you've said is that anything that's gone on before, like the picnic, is fine. But anything that comes up new, like within the last 5 years, the races that we do at Steep Rock, which start at 7 o'clock, they get done by 10:30 in order to get people out of the way, in order to allow our constituency, which is your constituency, to be able to enjoy our trails, that's very specific. You've done 8 to 10, and it's arbitrary. Sorry. I'm not speaking to that. Sorry. I'm speaking to the farmers, and we have yet to go and get an answer from the chair. I've now asked this for at least 2 times in a row, where the farm operations in the town of Washington fall in this new regulation. We all know what Hopkins does up in Warren. We know what we've got. If you look at the crowd that you've got in front of you here, you're seeing, you know, a lot of the people who are left farming this community, and they are very, very concerned about where we are going to fall as farmers in this regulation. I'm going to leave you with good people, good not-for-profits want to follow the letter of the law. So therefore, we're not going to even ask to go and do something that in our interpretation doesn't fit. We're not going to ask the zoning enforcement officer. We're not going to ask the chairman, and we're not going to ask the zoning board as a whole to go and change or deal with it on a micro basis. We're simply going to react to what you lay down as a regulation. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Stephen.
Nick, could I attempt to answer that in part anyway?
I'm sorry, Janet, say again?
Could I
Please.
attempt to
Yes.
answer that, at least in part anyway?
Absolutely.
Regarding what farms are allowed to do in the way of special events, I would say customary and incidental. If you have an apple orchard and you want to have apple picking day with hay rides up and down between the rows of trees, and you sell apple pies, that sounds like it's customary and incidental. If you have a vineyard and you want to have a wine tasting event, that sounds to me like it's customary and incidental. If you have a stable and you want to give pony rides and have a photographer come and take a picture of your kid on top of the pony, to me that sounds customary and incidental. But if you have a barn and you start renting out for wedding affairs, then you have a wedding venue that is not customary and incidental and is not allowed under the current regulations and would not be allowed under the proposed regulations either.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask that once again, and thank you very much for that, is that what we've had previously at this specific discussion about 18 is that it doesn't deal with farms. And what you've now done very specifically is says, yes, this does. Not only that, but it goes and clarifies what we've done in the past. I'm going to still say that it's, as you deal in the farming community with the evolution of how farms work, you have to go and understand that there's a need to not simply be the letter of the law, which is selling apples, having a bunch of people with apples, but actually having a byproduct of having lunch there. Now, are people coming for lunch, or are they coming to pick apples?
Steve, I won't disagree, but that is a different topic. We could work sometime in the future maybe on agricultural, creative adaptation for existing farm buildings and ecotourism and that kind of thing. But that's a separate, we could work on that in the future if you guys want to get together and work with us on that.
But it doesn't sound separate.
My point being,
Whoa, wait, time out.
sorry,
Mr. Solly still speaking?
my separate issue here, Tammy, my separate issue is that we're dealing with this now. These regulations are you guys are gonna vote on this, really quick. It's winter time, you're gonna do it. So therefore, where are we going? Are we any different than all the towns around us? The answer is, with this new regulation, you bet your bucket. So therefore, that's just something I want to throw out there. I just want you guys to at least, once again, please, at least understand where the baby is, where the bathwater is, and what you're doing. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Miss April, if you would like to speak, go for it. Just remember to
Yeah.
list your address.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Averill. I live at 250 Calhoun Street, Washington Depot, Connecticut.
Thank you.
So you say that this isn't, we can address farms later, but it sounds like you're regulating farms now. The way people are not buying.
I have to interject here as chairman. I have to interject. Right now, I don't believe that there's anything that we're dealing with in 18 point, the regulations that we're dealing with that has to do with farming. Farming activities are by right in the state of in Washington, Connecticut. You don't have to ask permission to farm. It's a use by right. What about?
I'm not asking permission to farm. I'm saying that you're limiting our potential for growth as people are buying fewer and fewer apples and looking for more events. And what are you doing at your farm that are going to draw people to the town? That seems to me what you're limiting it for us.
I don't see it that way. I'm sorry.
So is there something specific in the language that's going to exempt farms?
The nature of farming has already been discussed.
But what if you want to have a wedding at the farm?
When a farmer wants to do something that is not agriculture in nature, agricultural, then I think that is a subject that has to be dealt with. Like
you decide agriculture,
like yoga and a wedding venue. We have never gone after any farmer for any known, let's just say, potential non-agricultural uses on their farm. But as you say, as farmers basically are trying to think up of more and more ways to create income streams, then I think that the farmers in town have to bring forth some suggestions for the zoning commission to consider. We don't now, and nor have we ever kept farmers or have necessarily kept farmers from doing anything in the agricultural way. And all of a sudden, as you say, there are new venues for farmers that farmers are pursuing. It's a question of whether it's agricultural or not. Anyway, go ahead with your comments.
Mr. Chairman, the problem here, forgive me, I'm going to speak again, is because you and Ms. Hill and Mr. David and Ray all have a good heart. You don't think what you're doing is stopping otherwise lawful activities. But what you're doing by enacting a regulation that no one understands and no one really knows what it means and no one actually agrees that we need it is creating uncertainty and a bit of fear in a community that doesn't need it. And the point I tried to make earlier is we don't need this regulation now, and there is no reason for you to do it. Stop and study it. That's our only point. That's what Jim Brenton was saying. That's what the Planning Commission is saying, and it's what everybody on this call is saying.
Thank you.
Next would be Michelle Gora.
I just wanted to add to what Steve was saying, because I think a lot of the confusion has been about what is considered customary and incidental. And Mr. Ziska, you did a nice job of talking about customary and incidental for homes, but we have lots of organizations that are in the residential districts, farms included, but the library and Steep Rock and the Washington Club and probably others that are in the residential zone. And they're there by special permit, but that permit only talks about their buildings, not their activities. So now all of their activities are up for interpretation as to whether they are customary and incidental. And what one farm considers customary and incidental, one farm might not be doing. They're doing different things. And if feels that having a gala dinner is customary and incidental for a library because it's a fundraising event, somebody else might not. And so I think all of the places that are in the residential zone but are not homes are very concerned about this regulation. That is the confusion. Janet says it's misinformation. Nick, you say the farms aren't included at all, that they can do what they want. Our zoning for all intents, but the 12.8 that we have, we have, Mr. Ziska explained that that none of them were allowed, but we've operated as if everything was allowed. So people who've had organizations that have been hosting events for years are concerned because now something that was never regulated looks like it is being regulated, and there's uncertainty because it's not very how everybody could possibly get caught up in that. So I just wanted to clarify that one point of uncertainty.
Thank you.
Nick,
May I
again.
respond briefly?
Kevin, you got someone else?
Attorney Ziska.
Oh, okay, sure. Mike?
Michelle, Ms. Gora, you are raising an excellent point. You really are. And I'm glad you raised the point. I just want to say something from a practical standpoint, and I know this is very hard for people to accept and understand. I really do. From a practical standpoint, enforcement, especially in smaller towns like Washington, typically only happens when there's a complaint. If events are going on in a town and everybody's happy with them, nobody's bothered by them, typically an enforcement officer isn't going to get involved because the town has limited enforcement hours, it has limited enforcement funds. Enforcement can be very expensive. So towns tend to let things happen that aren't bothering anybody. So to the extent that you have had those activities going on by businesses and nobody's ever complained about them, the odds are that nobody ever will complain about them. The problem is that the commission at some point is going to get a complaint from somebody about something. And if they do get a complaint and they have to go to court about it, or, because the landowner who's complaining says you have to take this to court, and if you don't, I'm going to sue you for not protecting my rights or whatever. The commission has got to be able to look at its regulations and say, well, here it's allowed, and here's where it's allowed in the regulations. And right now, the regulations just aren't clear. They don't say anything about incidental and customary uses, and that's why I said at the beginning, this regulation at least finally does that. And I think that's one of the points of misunderstanding. This regulation actually gives the commission an extra ability to say this is okay. Whereas if it doesn't have this regulation, it can't do that because there's nothing in the regulations right now that says that customary and incidental regulations are okay. I did a word check on the entire set of regulations, and you won't find that language in there anywhere. It doesn't say that. So I'm just saying, when you get that neighbor who's going to complain about your activities and you go to the commission and say, help me, you want the zoning enforcement officer to be able to say, look, here it is in the regulations. And that's one of the reasons why that's in there. So it's, I know what you're saying. I really do. I understand that. You didn't say anything about it before, and now you're saying it. We have to wonder what it means. But really, the goal was to say, we didn't mean to exclude customary and incidental uses. And so I think what Nick and Janet are saying is that for agricultural uses, if you're conducting a use on your farm, or in your case, if you're conducting a use at your business and nobody's ever complained about it before, and nobody complains about it now, the commission's not going to go after it. Nobody's going to try to enforce you out of doing it. But if you do get that neighbor that comes in to complain, this gives the commission an ability to say, oh, okay, well, here we got a regulation that says it's permitted. We interpret it as a customary and incidental use, and therefore we're not going after it. It gives them the ability to do that and cut off that argument right off the bat. For those uses where it looks at it and says, Okay, we do have a problem with that. It provides a number of mechanisms for the landowner to come in and say, okay, we'll get a permit for that. We'll get a special permit for that. Just as Dimitri was saying earlier, there's a special permit provision. If the regulation needs to be tweaked, if there become special circumstances where a business or a farm says, you know what, we'd like you to go even further. We'd like you to give us even more opportunities to do that. Then the best way to accomplish that is by going to the commission and saying, here's what we'd like you to permit us to do, to again give the commission something to point to in the regulations when that neighbor complains and say, here it is, we can allow it, and we did. So thank you very much.
And Nick, can I also just add something?
Yes.
Michelle, you aren't really correct when you say that when we grant a special permit, we only consider the building and not the uses. For example, when we granted the special permit for Hollister House, we specifically asked what kind of uses were included. When we granted the special permit for the library addition, we were concerned about parking, and so we specifically discussed the kind of uses that were going to go on there. When we granted the special permit for the Montessori school, we did not think, well, there's only going to be classes. Of course you think there's going to be plays and athletic events and parents' day and all of that. So we do discuss uses that are going to be associated with the special permit.
Yes, absolutely, Janet. And the last special permit for Steep Rock, the uses at Macrocostas Preserve were discussed entirely. So, okay.
Just one more quick comment, and it's an answer to Mike. Mike, I remember obviously when we first had a relationship 20 years ago, and when you were younger and I was certainly younger too. But in one of the problems becomes that as law-abiding citizens, I mean, we are law-abiding citizens, to tweak the edge of it's good until you get hammered is not the way any of us want to work or do any of this. We really, really want to, yes, I can understand, we can change the regulations for farming, we can do all these other things in the future, but we're talking about right now, and under COVID, really by the time we get to the next gig, it's going to be, what, a year, 2 years from now, who knows when we're going to be able to do it. So thank you very much for all of your comments today. They've you and I know very well, we've been following the law very closely for eons. But as far as this, we're just trying to do better than that. Thank you.
Tammy?
I'm not seeing anyone else.
All right. Because 5 senses was discussed so much tonight, I want to bring to certainly into the minutes a public document that doesn't have a date on it, but it was issued by the zoning officer, Nick, our current zoning officer, and it was at 282 Beebrook Road, and the owner of subject property was Spring Hill Farms, LLC. And this application was to build a wine vineyard/vineyard barn with a separate bathroom building with a shell for future kitchen. Farm and also uses in this particular built farm, wine storage, and tasting room. That is the only permit that this address has, other than originally the farm buildings that were built some years ago, and they were also given by the enforcement officer at the time.
Excuse me, Mr. Sully, what was the date on that?
Oh, no, Catherine, just wait a sec, please.
Okay.
This was given, I believe, I don't know why this, okay, this was approved January 8th, 2020. And so all I'm saying is that this property has a use permit for an agricultural purpose, which is rightfully so, which has rightfully been earned and approved, but for a wine tasting and wine purchases. And that's the only permit that they have for this venue. I just wanted to bring that up to everyone's attention. I'm not sure what NC means, but I have that on my screen.
Yes, that is correct.
Oh, okay. Nick, you're here, of course.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that, Janet, I'd like to just give you a couple of minutes to read into the public hearing basically your last comments.
Okay, I'm going to cut some of them out. I'll say that many of them are in response to misinformation that was in the letters. This statement is dated January 12th. I hope that some people that wrote against this section will request a copy and read it because, well, for example, somebody was against the proposed revision because they said it was spot zoning. It's not spot zoning. The revised section 12.8 would apply, as does the current section 12.8, to the entire town, not to just one property. There were complaints about what a terrible commission the zoning commission is to work with. It's the worst one in the county. I include in this how we've tried to facilitate applications for commercial businesses. How in all the years I've worked for the town, and that's over 30 years, I can only think of one commercial application that was ever denied, et cetera, et cetera. Many people were against the regulation because, oh my God, the library would not be able to do any more fundraising with its library luminaries dinner parties. That's absolutely not true. If you can hold a library luminary dinner party now at a property owner's residence, you'll be able to hold it after this revision is adopted, and that would include such things like garden club meetings and neighborhood barbecues and political gatherings, library fundraising dinners. Those would not be impacted at all. Many people were against the regulation because of the terrible negative impact it would have on our institutions. But number one, the institutions that have that are operating under special permits already have those temporary types of events that are anticipated. They would not need a separate permit for those, like just as they don't need a separate permit for them now. And anyway, these events that are held on town, school, or religious institutions would be exempt under section 12.8.3. I agree with the writer who wrote that the zoning commission is supposed to act on behalf of all the citizens of our town and not just on behalf of one aggrieved party. And the town is attempting to do just that by proposing regulations which aim to work to protect the rights of all the residential property owners in town who purchased their properties in the farming residential district with the understanding that this district was the one where the peaceful and residential character of their neighborhoods would be preserved. I also believe that the zoning commissioners do welcome and support the arts and festivals and concerts and gala that contribute to the economic viability of Washington when they are held in appropriate locations in the existing venues such as town hall, town properties, private and public schools, church properties, the library, Judy Black Park, the Art Association, et cetera, where crowds are usual, customary, expected, and welcome. And I'll say again, when addressing the town's economic advantage in the arts, entertainment, and recreational activities, the 2014 POCD notes on page 18 the importance of these economic activities and recommends they be supported in appropriate locations. I think it should be noted, due to the many, many letters who objected to this, these revisions because they did not comply with the Plan of Conservation and Development or the Planning Commission's recommendations. Although it's the general goal of planning and zoning commissions to work together to address town matters, zoning commissions do have the authority to make their own decisions and are not mandated to implement all of a planning commission's recommendations, and this can be verified by consulting the state statutes. And again, I'll just add that it's the Washington Zoning Commission's duty to support and promote the economic and artistic goals of the Plan of Conservation and Development, but also to protect the rural and residential character of the town's residential neighborhoods and districts. It's its responsibility to promote and protect both. So I urge people to get a copy of the complete letter and statement and read it on their own.
I have a question. You didn't mention, it's Mary Metz. You didn't mention anything about the Washington Club and how that could be used.
Well, you mean how it can be used in other ways than the 4 different sections of the Washington Club? I'm not sure what your question is.
Are they allowed to hold events there on a regular basis?
Each of the venues of the Washington Club have events, cocktail parties, dinner parties at the beach club. Certainly the golf course hosts for the full membership of the club events, usually opening day in the springtime. The tennis section has its own events, albeit I think more related to Labor Day weekend, when they give out prizes for all of the tournaments that occur at that time of the year. And the Washington Club Hall, of course, is historically been a venue for weddings, parties, you name it. And without any involvement of the zoning commission.
Of course, now if I could respond, of course, now there would be, or there is the greater potential of zoning enforcement. At least it could be argued that we would have to apply for a special permit because we do sit in a residential neighborhood. If we were to, I don't know, have a series of days that went over the 7-day period, it's obviously very difficult to slice this baby. But I think the regulations are a little burdensome. And I also wonder why it's impossible for the town to approach the state and change the regulatory regime that we're finding so concerning. It's strange to me that our approach is that we're stuck in some kind of box. I understand the argument that Attorney Ziska has made, but it's our government. We can change the rules.
We can indeed. We can change our regs. You're absolutely right. Kathy Root, if you're still there, did you have a question? You may have left.
No,
Tammy?
I didn't know I'm here, but I didn't have another.
Okay. Specific question.
I think Michelle Gora did.
Hold on, that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 people online right now.
Oh,
They've been
sorry,
waiting a long time to speak and everybody's been interrupting them.
Yep.
I apologize. Sean Woodward.
Hi, everyone. Just wanted to reiterate, it seems like the simplest thing with this really is a noise ordinance. It seems to be really restrictive to start limiting anything to 2 days. It's sort of goes down a rabbit hole, and it seems like it's going to create more work for the zoning commission and the ZEO to deal with these things. I think several towns have the noise ordinance. There's some that are going through problems with it now. And so I just really just wanted to reiterate that. A few people have also mentioned that, because it seems just really bad to try and limit to 2 days. Some things that are very good. And the other comment was that there's a few things that have come up in the town with regard to whether it's on a state highway as compared to a rural town road. And I'm wondering if there's any consideration that could be made, since we're being specific for most of this conversation to the 5 senses. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy?
Michael Lloyd.
Okay, Michael.
Thank you, Tammy. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Couple of observations. One, it occurs to me that one of the best ways, actually, let me rewind a second. I believe it's fair to say that what we've been calling in this meeting so far the residential zone is really the farm and residential zone. Am I accurate in thinking that?
Yes.
And so it occurs to me that if one of the objectives that we have is to balance, as you guys are, trying carefully to do, the needs for conservation and development in that farm and residential zone, if we want to preserve the rural nature of Washington as much as we can, we ought to give the farmers as many opportunities. Hard to farm, we're losing agricultural land at a startling rate in New England, and we ought to give the farmers as many revenue opportunities as we can to be able to maintain that tough industry. I'm sure that in trying to balance the needs for conservation and development, all the commissioners, this has been a long slog for you all, and I'm sure you must all be feeling a very heavy degree of deal fatigue to get these regulations in place and to move on with your lives. I would echo what Mr. Rimsky and Mrs. Gora said earlier on. You have the opportunity, and what Attorney Ziska said, you have an opportunity to completely rewrite these regs in light of the observations that you've heard over the last year. And I believe that there is a way to do that in a way that respects the residential and farming nature of the town, and in a way which respects our need for economic and cultural progress. And I would ask you all to, I would urge you, and I think this is a message that hopefully you're hearing from everybody, that you don't have to pull the trigger tonight. You don't have to pull the trigger next week. And it's better to have a good outcome than it is to have a quick outcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Tammy.
Mr. Ingrassia, are you still there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I had actually lowered my hand. I simply was going to comment, Chairman Solly. I don't quite understand why you made the reference to the permit on Beadbrook, but I would observe only that it is precisely because the permit is for a use different than 5 senses that we have sought 4 times and received from the town and this commission 4 times permission to hold 5 senses, and we've held it under the rules that we've discussed, and each year we've made more changes as we've learned more, from 3 weekends to 2 weekends, to turning off amplified music at 10 p.m. to expanding parking, etc. And all of that is a byproduct of what has been our belief that we needed a permit for that activity, which I think the town also believed we did, by the way. and two, in a dialogue with town officials to figure out how to mitigate impact and make things work and make it better and safer. So I don't know what the purpose was. It sort of reinforced to me that for all of these changes, we really are talking about 5 census. I don't know why else you would cite only one permit of all the permits in town, but it strikes me that it would make me nervous. I put in the chat if I were a different farm, that simply you reading that. I don't know what you meant by reading it. I don't know why you wanted to get that into the record, but it certainly suggested to me that if we wanted to do pizza with wine tasting or farm to table dinners in the evening, you're somehow suggesting that might not be incidental, in which case maybe it's not incidental in April and maybe it's not incidental at Waldingfield Farm. So anyhow, I had lowered my hand. I've spoken too long. I just didn't understand why you would have raised that.
Simply because it's part of the public record. And the fact that, yes, you have now 4 times gotten an administrative permit for a very specific time period. But as far as the long-term use of that property, as far as the zoning commission is concerned and the town's concerned, by the fact that you have, and what is the rightful use of that property, as far as I'm concerned, it's for the tasting and purchase of wine.
We are in agreement, and I would add whatever incidental and customary uses accrue beyond that, because those are the words that your commission has chosen. But wherever there's a doubt, I hope that we'd always be in a position to walk in and talk to either the zoning enforcement officer or you or one of the other commissioners and be coached in whatever way is appropriate to be coached to make sure we're following the rules.
I appreciate your offer. Tammy, anybody else?
Yes, I'm gonna slaughter this last name. Brian Hagenbuck.
Brian.
Thank you, everybody. I'll try to make this short. My name is Brian Hagenbach. I am the Executive Director of Steep Rock Association, 2 Green Hill Road. And I moved here about a year ago, and I love this place. I love this community, and I really respect what y'all are trying to do here. And Steep Rock, I know, has a long and special place in this community's history. I want to clarify a couple of comments and some misconceptions that I've been hearing tonight. First, Steep Rock does not have a special permit for any activities or programs that occur on our 4 preserves. The only special permit that I'm aware of is for the 2 buildings that we just purchased on Christian Street and the 3-acre lot there. And I'm looking at that special permit right now. So it's the lots and educational programs that we have there. So one of the reasons that we came to the Zoning Commission at the February 24th, 2020 meeting was that we were asking to be included with religious institutions and schools for the special exemption permit. But apparently in the new regulations that are here, we have not been included. And that raises some significant concerns because we are a nationally accredited land trust. And one of the requirements of our accreditation is that we follow all local, state, and national regulations. So I'm a real stickler about that and following process. As these regulations are written, we do have activities that occur at 7 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Solly mentioned our Steep Rock Endurance road race series. We also have bird watching events. If you're a birder, you're out at the crack of dawn or earlier. And so we do have events that are outside of the realm of those hours. The other thing I'm concerned about is if we do have to go through a permitting process, we have activities and events and programs every month. I'm going to spend a lot of my time in the zoning office, and I'm going to get mired in really a logistical nightmare of red tape with all of the different activities if I need to get special permits for them. And one of the concerns that has also been shared is that we don't distinguish residential homes from nonprofit organizations and the activities of these organizations. I think they need to be separate and distinct. And I think we are providing a lot of regulatory constraint to nonprofit organizations. Understand that in today's environment, nonprofits and farming operations have to be versatile. We have to diversify. We can't do business as usual and expect to survive financially. So we are at Steep Rock are constantly creating new events, new activities, trying to encourage new donors because our operating budget is funded entirely by donations. Many of you are on our donations list. Thank you so much. But we are not public. We're not getting taxpayers' dollars for our operating budget. And so we have to diversify. We have to be versatile. And I think of farms and I think of farm to table. And I think of a wonderful friend of mine in the Catskills that they have camping, farm camping with weekends. And so we have to be able to diversify, but these regulations are really putting a stigma on what we can do, how we can think about it, how flexible we can be in doing this. And when we come up with a great idea, now we have to go through this whole regulatory process for that. So I am really encouraging the Zoning Commission to think about exempting not only accredited land trusts, but nonprofit organizations from section 12.8 or basically reject the adoption of these regulations. You've got my written comments, but I wanted to clarify some of the things that I've heard tonight and correct them. Thank you so much for your time.
Yep, thank you. And your comments are on our docket. Tammy.
Susan Averill.
Susan.
Thank you so much for all the time you've taken with this. I would really like to second what we just heard from Steep Rock. I think we need to be flexible. Farms especially are struggling to survive. And we're thankful that you've allowed farms in the past to be flexible, and we would like to ensure that in the future. One of the things that wasn't discussed that's in the regulations is the limitation on trailers. A lot of us farmers are getting older, and we would like to be able to have guest workers to harvest our crop, and that's more than 4 weeks for most farmers. So having a limitation there without an exception for farms, working farms, farms that derive their income from farm would be appreciated. We also are a little disappointed that all the letters that the commission received, I know it would have taken a lot of time to read them all, but to have a rebuttal to those letters without having read them and letting everyone listen to them is a disservice to the town. So I would appreciate your maybe publishing those letters before you make any decisions so that people can read all of them. And I thank you for your time.
Yep.
Ms. Averill, they are on the town website.
They
All
are
the letters
published.
have been posted on the town website.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tammy.
Yes. Sorry.
How are you doing?
I'm kind of awake. This is my second meeting of the night. This is number 2 for me, so bear with me. I'm not seeing anybody else at the moment.
Okay.
Wanted to say hello.
Susan, you're back.
Now I'll mute myself again.
Okay. What I'd like to do prior to requesting a motion to adjourn the public hearing or to hear comments on the potential of continuing the public hearing. I'd just like to go around to the commissioners for their final thoughts for this evening. If you all have any.
Yeah, I have a final thought.
Ray, let me just understand. You mentioned, I think, at the last public hearing, and I thought it was very poignant that the people who are not represented tonight are the people who live in the residential district. And I think that they're not represented necessarily this public hearing because they count on the zoning commission to represent the residential and farming district in a very respectful way, and certainly equal to the cultural and historic and the other aspects that make up our this public hearing. So I do you remember that comment you made? Because I thought it was very good. If you don't remember, I just think that you made a very poignant comment that we are here and we hear those unsung people out there who did not come to the public hearing. And I want the minutes to reflect that we understand the public, the residential people and the residential district. And we are respectful to the people who didn't show up because we know they're out there and they count on us to represent them.
You're correct, Nick. And I feel that
also
some of the people that I hear.
Wait. The commission is talking now. I think that we're almost over public comment unless there's something that has not been brought up before, and we need to get that done very quickly. So
it's absolutely insulting, Nick, that you think that we don't represent the town.
No, I didn't say that.
That is absolutely insulting.
I did
live in residential districts. The idea that you, David and Ray, think there is some large group of the unseen silent majority that didn't show up is absolutely insulting, and you should know that.
Well, that's your
opinion. We agree 100%. Please.
Yep. Ray, you and I were having this discussion, and I just was trying to remember something that you said in an earlier public hearing, and I thought that anyway, I said my piece, but I'm not by any means discounting anybody who appeared at this hearing tonight, not at all. So I don't want that to be a sense that one takes from this. Anyway, I want to move into a situation for the commission to decide whether or not, number one, we want to close the public hearing or continue it to some future date. Want to hear the comments about this?
I certainly have a comment, Nick.
Sure.
Who was the speaker that you insulted? I couldn't catch the identity.
That was me, Ray, Robert Hackney, 125 West Shore Road, 38-year resident of this community.
The point I was going to make was going to be equally insulting to the folks that feel that the commission is insulting the great unwashed out here. Some of the people that I hear from are regulars, they're old timers. I've been here 40 years. I have participated in a number of the fundraising events. I'm very active in town. I was helping Joanne Tordy get ASAP started, must have been 30 years ago now. I couldn't keep up with our energy level, so I decided to switch over to zoning. And, but some of the comments I hear from that are folks that are not going to write letters, their comments were triggered by events at the Five Senses. And that was the event that got my attention and that got the commission's attention. And it culminated in a sense in a visit that I made to the Five Senses this past fall. There was an event for one of the other organizations in town that I support. And when I drove into Five Senses, I was astonished at what I refer to as mission creep. That place in there did not look like a farm at all. They had tailored it to take care of Palobolus's needs in part. There was an enormous new barn there, which I don't know what it's going to be used for. But when I saw the facility that was in there, it was a far cry from a.
Ray, if I could interject, I don't want to get into any discussions that regard deliberation. I think your comments, I believe, I'm not positive, may be better off during deliberation. I think that Mike would back me up that you sound like you have come to a conclusion on whether or not we're going to enact these regulations. And yes, the zoning commission put them forth, so it is clear that we are trying to enact them. But I just want you to keep your comments sort of general.
I'm done.
Okay. Now, as far as what I've asked the commission to either comments for the public hearing or comments about the continuance of this public hearing. So I want to hear what people think.
Nick, can I interrupt you really quick? I'm sorry. There are two more hands raised.
Okay.
One is from, it's
Right.
two more people. It's Catherine Root.
Okay.
Hey, so I read most of the 127 pages, and I feel like I've done a fair amount of kind of homework on the process. But what I would like to know is, after tonight, whether it's now or like 2 a.m, hopefully it will not be.
Yeah.
What happens? What are the next steps? Is there a vote? When does the vote happen? Is there another step that's a meeting? Is it the zoning meeting? The zoning committee meets and then we are informed of the outcome. Like, how does that work?
Okay. I was just commenting to my fellow commissioners as to whether or not there was a need to continue this public hearing. That's number one. If the commission feels that there's no need, then I think that the commissioner will make a motion to close the public hearing. At that point, we have really almost an unlimited amount of time, certainly 65 days, maybe even longer, to deliberate and return what we're going to do with 12.8.
So it will be within 65 days or like?
Yep. I think that we will discuss, if we close the public hearing, we will discuss whether we want a special meeting between now and our regular meeting on January 25th, as to whether we want to have a special meeting for the purpose of deliberation on this 12.8.
Okay. But once that happens, then it's decided and there's no further recourse.
Yes, we can choose to enact what we put forth. We can choose to take some things out of what we put forth. We can choose to do nothing.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Tammy,
One final one, and that is Rachel Jacobellis.
Okay. Rachel.
I live at 43 Barnes Road. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So that's between the school pavilion and the gunnery. And then this is something I didn't put in my letter, which is why I wanted to speak up. And I heard a lot of people talking about, oh, well, we have all these other venue spaces that you can use, but that, you know, aren't in residential areas. But I would actually argue that those areas are more densely populated with homes along the area than in the more rural farm areas. So, I mean, the music that comes up from the pavilion just comes right up the valley. We hear it, and we're like pretty far up the hill. So all the other homes hear it too, but it's part of being in the community. And I mean, I also felt that my letter, which I thought was really heartfelt, wasn't, you guys are discounting it because it seems like so many people wrote in with their concerns, and you're like, oh, we're just going to discount all of those because people are uninformed. They don't understand. And that really hurts. Please let this go.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Ms. Jacobellis, you keep muffling in and out. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what's happening. It's very hard to understand what you're saying.
Sorry, that was probably my earbuds, which is why I asked if you guys could hear me at the beginning. Is it better now?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Should I start over or?
I would go from where you are because you're almost at your 1 minute mark.
Well, did you hear what I said?
Yes, it just kept breaking in and out.
Right.
My point is that I live on 43 Barnes Road, which is in between the pavilion and the gunnery. And information that I didn't put in my letter is that I can hear all the music that happens at the pavilion. It just travels up the valley, and it's a very residential area here, but it's part of being in the community. It's fine. And I understand that, you know, it's annoying, but it's part of life, and it brings the community together, and it brings happiness and joy. And, you know, just go inside if it's bothering you that much, but that's not what I said before. Anyway, and then the second point is that I wrote a really heartfelt letter, and I felt like what you guys are saying is that so many people wrote in, so many people attended this night, and more than normal. But you're like, oh, the people that, you know, I've talked to a few people, but they wouldn't write a letter. I mean, who wouldn't write a letter if they care that much about it? And also that the letter that I wrote was misinformed, so therefore it doesn't matter. I disagree. And I think that it's very hurtful to hear that. And sorry you had to look at my ear the whole time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Tammy.
Yes, we're good.
Okay. So I leave it to the commission to make a decision about closing the hearing tonight or continuing. That's the first thing we have to deal with.
I would move that we close the hearing. I think we've heard everybody that wanted to be heard.
I would second that motion.
There's a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Is there any other comment regarding the motion? Now
No.
for peace. Hearing no comment, all in favor of closing this public hearing signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. We have 5 ayes. All those opposed?
Two. I have 2. How many do you have?
We all good? All right.
I'm good.
We have an opportunity to have either a special meeting for the purpose of deliberation between now and our regular meeting, which I believe is January 25th. I think we have one public hearing on January 25th. And Shelley, I don't know what other business we have there, but we could also, well, it just depends on how we want to handle this. Have a special meeting or take part of our regular meeting. I would individually rather have a special meeting, but I'm just 1 out of 5.
I would rather wait till our regular meeting.
Okay,
I think we should begin deliberation at our regular meeting. If we cannot come to an agreement, then we can set another meeting.
correct. Janet?
Yeah, I'm flexible, whichever everybody decides, I'll agree
Okay.
to.
Ray?
Nick, there is one public hearing that night.
I believe it's a Lufkin public hearing on a detached accessory apartment on Lower Church Hill.
Yes.
Can we have that at first, of course, and then go straight into our regular meeting and have our discussion on 12.8?
Yes,
So
we-
that folks that are there that were here can hear and don't have to sit through a long meeting.
Absolutely.
Yes, we can do that. That seems to be the wish of the commission. So I will make a motion that we designate our regular meeting January 25th, 2021 for the purposes of deliberation on the regulation changes of 12.8.
No, not the only purpose. That's among our purposes, right? We have other business to conduct.
Our other business is going to happen anyway. We don't have to make a motion about that. We have to make a motion about when we're going to deliberate, and I just made a motion that we take part of our regular meeting and have our deliberation at that point. But it has nothing to do with the other business at that meeting.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
Nick, we announce our agenda when we post the meeting. We can make the agenda anything we want to make it. We don't need a motion now for that, I don't think. You have the sense of the commission.
Janet, what do you think? Do we think we need a motion for setting a time for deliberation?
I don't think so, but if Mike is still here, you could ask him. But I don't.
No, you don't need a motion for that.
Okay, then when the agenda is put forth to the public, then we will have deliberation on 12.8 at that meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Got it.
Anybody else have anything they want to say? I think the public hearing went very well. We heard a lot of people and we had a huge gallery. So I'm quite pleased.
Can I make one comment?
Certainly.
I'd like to thank everyone for their input tonight. Certainly gave me a lot to think about, and I will consider all the suggestions that were made. And I hope that people can remain calm and we'll get through this. We're all on the same side.
Okay. And I'd like to thank Mike Ziska for joining us. And Mike, I think that we may need your services on January 25th.
Oh, I can be there if you'd like.
Okay, I will let you know.
Okay, very good.
Okay, with plenty of notice.
Okay.
Yep. All right, I make a motion that we adjourn this special meeting. Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so carried. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, kids. That was a lot of fun. Jeez. Oh,
Good
my.
night.
Yeah. Have a good night, guys.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Take it easy.
Good to see you, Mike.
Say hi to Chandler for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's in another country.
I
Thank
know.
God.
I know.
Yeah.
It was a
Yeah.
long
Be
time.
good. Really.
It was a long
Keep-
time. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Keep healthy.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Good to talk to you. Yeah, bye-bye. Thank you, Tammy.
No problem.